Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on May 5th, 2025. This meeting included comments and discussion about allocating budget for fiscal year 2026, increasing city water, stormwater, and sewer rates, rezoning property for additional public land in the school district and at Hickory Nature Area, rezoning the Downtown Library to permit private ownership and private uses, amending the process for modification in a planned unit development zoning district, and adopting a new ordinance of requirements for rental units in the city. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on May 5th, 2025. All agenda items were approved or postponed unanimously. There were 4 absences: Council members Harrison, Ghazi Edwin, Ackman, and Mayor Taylor. These 4 have been absent an average of 10 times since November 2022. In the last 5 years, this many absences has happened only twice. In December 2022, at the 3rd meeting of a unanimous council, and in March 2020, at the beginning of COVID lockdowns. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included a presentation from Stephanie Carter, Chair of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, or ICPOC.
What I would like to do is invite all of you, members of council, members of the public, to what will be the initial first annual Jude Walton Social Justice Symposium. It is going to be held on May 31st. We'll be out at Washtenaw Community College.
There was a presentation acknowledging the untimely death of local activist and historian Shirley Beckley.
Shirley was the heart and soul of our Community Leadership Council, who are here today to honor Shirley's life and impact on our community. She was a brave, intelligent, and a moral compass that compelled her to have a positive impact on the community. Shirley was a mentor for countless people and a tireless advocate for the Black community and anyone whose rights were trampled on. Shirley had a long career in affordable housing, starting with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, then Okemos and the Muskegon Housing Commission.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for about 5 minutes. 18 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 11 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 13 items and expenditures of over $2.6 million. With only 7 members in attendance, 3 items requiring 8 votes had to be postponed. The rest of the consent agenda was approved unanimously without discussion. This week, City Council hosted a public hearing for the annual budget, which will be approved later this month. 15 people spoke. Some spoke in support of funding for social services.
I'm Eileen Spring, and I'm here on behalf of the more than 140 community programs who rely on food gatherers' daily distribution of food in the form of free groceries and meals at shelters, affordable housing sites, food pantries, health clinics throughout Washtenaw County. We are hoping that the City of Ann Arbor will consider allocating more resources to our local food safety net. We estimate it will cost us an additional $2.5 million to replace the loss of federal food.
The Rising Hope program currently has distributed over $235,000 of direct financial assistance to support participant households in maintaining their vouchers, securing housing, and maintaining their housing. I ask that you provide full funding to this program for a 3rd year so we can continue to serve more justice-impacted households in our county.
And I'd like to encourage you to renew and fully fund the Rising Hope for Housing program for a 3rd year so that we may serve more households.
The program is intentionally focused on those who face some of the greatest barriers to stable housing. These are individuals who often fall through the cracks and the Rising Hope helps ensure that they are not left behind.
And I'm speaking on behalf of A Brighter Way to promote the reauthorization of funding for Rising Hope for housing. Without stable housing, justice-impacted and returning citizens face overwhelming barriers and are more likely to reoffend. Every dollar invested in Rising Hope saves far more in emergency services, incarceration costs, and shelter expenses.
Please fully fund this program to the greatest extent possible in this year's budget so that we can build upon the innovative and collaborative approach of the Rising Hope program that helps improve people's lives in our community.
Some commenters spoke in favor of funding to reconfigure reconfigure Stadium Boulevard, eliminate car lanes, and add more biking infrastructure.
And now it's urgent that you do appropriate some local funds for some quick build safety projects. And like reconfiguring stadium.
We don't need to spend a lot of money to do a quick build program and demonstrate the effectiveness of road dieting multi-lane roads. Frankly, this is something that doesn't really need to be studied. Now that we don't have access to the federal money, which is a loss, it also means that we don't have to follow all of the federal guidelines for how we spend that money.
But we cannot wait for roads to be resurfaced to tackle the most dangerous roads under city ownership.
We are proposing a simple, low-cost, quick-build pilot, reducing it to 2 travel lanes with a center turn lane and adding protected bike lanes using paint and post.
We need illumination. There are things that Vision Zero proves works. Illumination. Crash site improvements. When we have a crash, we need to go out there and look at it, and we need to look at sight line obstructions. Vision Zero, I'd like to remind you, has 6 core components: encourage, educate, engineer, enforce, evaluate, and equity.
I live near Stadium Boulevard and also support the stadium redesign pilot for better safety for everyone.
We need to have some roads that are multi-lane. We need to have some roads that allow a lot of people to move quickly. And also, in my travels throughout the city, I see regular examples of how people's behavior that is not going to comport well, that's not going to be willing to accept all of our roads going down to 1 lane and traffic being more congested.
I urge you to appropriate funds under this budget to reconfigure or diet all remaining multi-lane segments of the Stadium and Maple corridor for a 2-year pilot.
We don't need more studies, we need action. I urge the city to, in addition to the road diets on Stadium, add protected bike lanes and fully consider using hardened bollards as a protective barrier.
If you're not going to fund these sorts of lane diets and other safety improvements, then it becomes partly your responsibility.
Later this month, City Council will vote to approve a budget for fiscal year 2026. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved an ordinance amendment that will eliminate the requirement that alarm systems be registered with the city. Council considered increases to rates that residents pay for water, stormwater, and sewer service. At public hearings earlier in the evening, residents spoke in support of these increases.
I think this is a necessary thing. One other way to reduce our tax burden and get better utilities for a lower cost is by having higher density.
What would really help with us not having to further increase our stormwater rates would be if we allowed more density, especially vertical density.
Without discussion, Council voted unanimously to approve all 3 rate increases. Council considered the rezoning of 2 properties recently annexed into the city. Both are owned by the Ann Arbor Public Schools and will be zoned public land. Without discussion, Council voted unanimously to approve the rezonings. At a future meeting, these rezonings will be the subject of public hearings and final approval at second reading. After a brief introduction, Council voted unanimously to approve a rezoning to create more public land, expanding Hickory Nature Area on the north side of town, adjacent to M14. At a future meeting, this rezoning will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered a rezoning to allow for private ownership of the downtown Ann Arbor District Library. The library property is currently zoned public land. This zoning category permits the construction of any building of whatever size, so long as the property remains in public ownership with normal principal and incidental uses of government functions and services. Once rezoned, the property can be sold and library services will no longer be required as a primary function or use. At the City Planning Commission, the library director explained how a rezoning to D1 or downtown core would facilitate a high-rise in a public-private partnership.
Public lands precludes private ownership and private development. So we wanted to have this hurdle out of the way before we started talking to potential development partners.
The library property is adjacent to city-owned property that is already zoned D1 or downtown core. In 2018, voters approved a city charter amendment explicitly requiring that this city-owned land remain in public ownership as the center of the city. Over 26,000 voters approved the measure in a high turnout, even year November election that engaged nearly 63% of registered voters. Earlier this year, City Council approved 2 ballot questions, one to repeal the 2018 Charter Amendment and another to transfer the property to the library for $1. As directed by City Council, there will be a special election this August to decide those 2 questions. Nothing else will be on the ballot. The last time Ann Arbor held an August election in an odd year, a total of only 10,000 city voters participated, about 14% turnout. The vote this August will determine if the city asset can be transferred to the library for $1. Once transferred, the library board can unilaterally sell or dispose of the property. Several current members of the library board, as well as the current library director, have previously endorsed its sale. This week, Council Liaison to the Planning Commission, Lisa Dish, attempted to explain the rezoning of the library property and referred to the 2018 Charter Amendment.
I just want to clarify so no one is confused. So this site currently includes the Ann Arbor District Library building and adjacent service parking lot. It doesn't have anything to do with the center of the city.
Her statement is misleading insofar as the rezoning will permit the combination of both the center of the city and the library property for private redevelopment. The rezoning will permit library property to be sold into private ownership so that public library services are no longer the primary function or use. A small number of voters this August will determine if these public assets can be sold for high-rise private development across both sites, consistent with downtown core zoning. Council voted unanimously to approve the rezoning of the downtown library to downtown core for private development. At a future meeting, the rezoning will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council considered an ordinance amendment that will make it easier to modify the use of individual parcels within a planned unit development district. These PUD zoning districts are designed to provide special benefit to the city, as outlined in supplemental regulations. Council Liaison to the Planning Commission, Lisa Dish, explained proposed changes to how such districts can be modified.
Currently, the city code requires that a PUD cannot be modified unless all owners with a property interest either participate in the modification or approve it. And while it is entirely appropriate that you need unanimous approval to establish a PUD, we wouldn't want to force that on unsuspecting individuals. It does not make sense at all to raise such a, impose such an obligation on requests to affect one portion of a PUD, one owner's portion of the PUD.
She did not explain how an unsuspecting individual would accidentally find themselves in a PUD zoning district. The Unified Development Code explains that such districts are created under a single ownership or with authorization from all parcel owners within the district. This week's proposed changes will allow the owner of one parcel in a PUD district to request zoning modifications to their own parcel without having to get authorization from other members of the district. At first reading, Council unanimously approved the amendment. At a future meeting, this amendment will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Finally, Council considered a new ordinance that will require landlords to meet certain standards for sustainability. Earlier in the evening, multiple landlords spoke out against it.
We are at an economically precarious time with concerns of a looming recession. Burdening landlords now would only reduce the rental supply, raise rents, and harm the very people this ordinance claims to help, tenants.
I understand and respect the city's intent behind the green rental housing ordinance. I think everybody wants safer, healthier, and more energy efficient housing, but I feel it's important to voice the unintended consequences that this ordinance will create for landlords and ultimately the availability of rental housing in our city. We have to prioritize collaboration because right now the message that many landlords are hearing isn't let's make our rentals greener, it's maybe it's time to sell our properties.
Is this being applied only to rental units? Is there a distinction between single-family homes and multiple unit complexes? These requirements are not practical for a single-family home and will result in significant increases in rental fees to tenants.
It is clear that the administration wants to grow the city. The approval of over 15 large multi-unit buildings proves that. But while supporting large developers, these ordinances, both passed and proposed, ignore the backbone of Ann Arbor rental market, individually owned homes and condos.
One commenter was a member of the Renters Commission. She serves on that commission as a non-voting landlord representative.
Many of us share your desire to reach the goals of A2.0, but to succeed, we need a more practical implementation plan. If compliance isn't feasible for many properties, we're going to risk losing some of those affordable units. And that's just the facts of the money that is involved here. We should support green rental housing inspectors to help landlords understand where they stand and what upgrades will be feasible. This will also help us as a city to see what the actual costs are.
It also does not seem to make sense for individual property owners who rent just a single-family property. I feel as if not all stakeholders have had a chance to weigh in and assist in the ordinance formation, and think this ordinance deserves that chance.
Recent ordinance, including the one currently under consideration, seem to have been designed for large-scale property management firms or investors who own multiple rentals as a primary income source. If these ordinances are meant to push rental properties toward green upgrades, then the city also must provide financial assistance for compliance, especially for those who did not purchase a property with profit in mind.
Some commenters spoke in support of the ordinance.
I'm a Ward 1 resident and a program manager for the Washtenaw Ann Arbor 2030 district. I'm here to express my personal support and also the support of the 2030 district for the green rental housing ordinance. There are many resources available to landlords who do need to upgrade their units, and the 2030 district is here to help as well.
I don't think it's that complicated. I guess I'm not a landlord, so maybe it's more complicated than that, but from my reading, it seems pretty simple.
I support this green rental housing ordinance. I mean, it's always amusing to hear landlords speak on behalf of us tenants. My problem with the ordinance is it's too lenient. As it stands, it will be ineffective in terms of advancing the city's climate goals.
Council voted unanimously to postpone the ordinance due to absences. The meeting adjourned before 9:30 p.m. after 2 overflow public comments. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
Should I still go? No. We'll give you your time back.
Where are all the tech pros when we need them?